Welcome viewers to Body Unified Flow. Here we simplify complexity and amplify performance. Today we are diving deep into a truly transformative topic, the Last Planner System Foundations, specifically focusing on what LPS actually is and how collaborative, commitment-based planning works. Let's face it, if you have ever dealt with the absolute headache of a project schedule falling apart the second it hits the field, this explainer is designed exactly for you. Here's a quick look at our roadmap for today. We'll start with an introduction to LPS, compare push versus pull planning, break down the 5 core principles, explore the should, can, will, did logic, walk through the actual levels of planning, and then wrap up with some key takeaways. By the time we wrap up this session, you're going to have a really solid grasp on the difference between pull and push planning methodologies. We'll make sure you understand the 5 critical principles that actually make LPS tick. You'll know exactly how to apply that should, can, will, did logic framework to your own projects. And finally, you'll master those specific planning horizons, right from the high-level milestones down to daily execution. All right, let's jump straight into section 1, meeting the last planner. So, traditionally, planning happens way up at the top, right? But research consistently shows that workflow unpredictability is a massive factor in why projects fail. Enter the Last Planner system. Originated by Glenn Ballard, this system takes a totally different approach. It places the power of planning directly in the hands of the very last individual in the chain. We're usually talking about the foreman or the frontline supervisor. Why them? Because the person pouring the concrete or running the electrical lines is literally the only one who can ensure a predictable workflow downstream. They are the ones actually closest to the work. Moving right along to section 2, let's talk about push versus pull planning, because this is a huge paradigm shift. Picture this. Traditional push planning is basically top-down guessing. You have a master schedule that forces work onto the field. It's like demanding the drywall gets installed regardless of whether the framing is actually finished. It just creates absolute chaos on site. On the flip side, LPS uses pull planning, which is sometimes called reverse phase scheduling. This is a collaborative, commitment-based approach. Work is only pulled into the schedule based on actual verified readiness and the removal of all constraints. It is a total game changer. Glenn Ballard hit the nail on the head when he described LPS as a way of converting what should be done into what can be done. Think about that for a second. It's not about wishful thinking. It's about creating a genuinely ready-to-work inventory. Because when your frontline teams pull from a constraint-free inventory, those weekly work plans suddenly become highly predictable, and that stabilizes your entire production system. Okay, section 3. Let's break down the mechanics of reliability with the 5 LPS principles. According to the research, this whole system rests on 5 core pillars. First off, tasks have to be planned in detail just before execution approaches, not months in advance. Second, you absolutely cannot do this in a vacuum. You have to plan in the presence of the actual people doing the work. Third, every single constraint and hurdle must be cleared beforehand. Fourth, the commitments that get made have to be reliable, public promises. And finally, the team needs to embrace continuous improvement. You have to learn from failures instead of just pointing fingers. Which brings us to section 4, the should, can, will, did logic. This is how we filter the workflow. I want you to think of this logic as your ultimate quality control filter against bad planning. Step 1 is should. This is simply what the master schedule demands we do. But we immediately filter that through step 2, which is can. What is actually ready and constraint-free? Like if we should paint today, but we can't because the drywall is still wet, the task stops right there. It doesn't move forward. Step 3 is will. This is the sound, constraint-free work the last planners confidently commit to in their weekly work plan. And step 4 is did, what was actually executed on site. By strictly forcing work through this filter, your schedule reliability is going to absolutely skyrocket. Now, of course, this logic doesn't just happen by magic. Researchers McComber and Howell point out that LPS is really an operating system that requires articulating and activating conversations. If you're going to make a reliable promise about what you will do, you have to assess interrelated tasks, you've got to ensure you have the right information, and you have to negotiate agreements with the other trades. It's a highly active, highly communicative process. You're basically replacing silent assumptions with verified public agreements. All right, section 5. Let's look at the actual levels of LPS planning, or the timeline of action. LPS uses something called progressive elaboration. That just means teams plan in much greater depth as they get closer to actually doing the work. You start way up high with milestone planning. From there, we move into phase scheduling, using that collaborative pull technique we talked about earlier. Next is the make ready or look ahead plan, where you're actively hunting down and removing constraints 6 to 10 weeks out. From that beautifully clean inventory, you generate the weekly work plan, where those reliable promises are made. And finally, the team coordinates out in the field through daily stand-up huddles. It is a completely seamless flow from the big master schedule right down to tomorrow morning's tasks. So how do we actually know if any of this is working? We measure it with percent plan complete, or PPC. At the end of every single weekly planning cycle, we check our planning reliability. Did we actually complete the tasks we promised we would? But here is an absolutely vital distinction, and honestly, it's where traditional project management usually gets it wrong. PPC is not a weapon. You do not use it to punish individuals. It's a diagnostic tool used solely to find the root causes of variability. That is how the system learns and gets better, week after week. But look, beneath all the data and the schedules, we can't forget the deeply human element at play here. When people make commitments in those weekly planning sessions, they're doing it in front of their peers. They are staking their professional reputation and their public identity on their ability to deliver. And you know what happens? Over time, as those promises are kept, the team builds this incredibly deep, unshakable trust. And it's that trust, more than anything else, that ultimately reduces project risk and drives the success of the whole system. Section 6. Let's wrap this up with our conclusion and key takeaways. We've covered some serious ground today. We explored the massive transition from top-down push scheduling to collaborative pull planning. We defined exactly why the frontline supervisor is the true last planner. We mapped out those 5 essential principles and the really powerful should, can, will, did logic that filters your workflow. We established the 5-step cascade of planning levels. And finally, we highlighted how PPC acts as a feedback loop to build continuous improvement and deep professional trust. So I want to leave you with a question to really chew on. The last planner system is way more than just a set of spreadsheets or sticky notes on a wall. It's a fundamental cultural shift based entirely on trust. Knowing that, what is the very first step you're going to take on your next project to empower your frontline, stop the top-down guessing, and start truly knowing what's going to get built tomorrow? Here are the foundational research papers and sources we cited in today's explainer. I highly recommend checking these out for your further study. Thank you so much for joining us here at Bodhi Unified Flow, where we simplify complexity and amplify performance. Until next time, keep planning with purpose.